Hello, welcome everyone. This is the What's New in OpenShift 4.7 briefing for the field. I am represent the OpenShift product management team, and my name is Tushar Katarki. Let me turn on my video. First of all, if you have any questions, we're going to go through a lot of presentation material today, but if you have any questions, please use the Q&A forum on Prime Time, or if you're on OpenShift.tv, use the comments. Any outstanding questions will be addressed afterwards. This call is being recorded, and so you will get that recording and slide deck and the Q&A questions answered eventually after the call. So as you see, we have a lot of content to cover, and without further ado, let's get into it. This is the OpenShift product management team. We do this more or less for every release, just before the release. What's new? OpenShift 4.7 content covers the stuff in. One thing I didn't do is turn off my notifications. So give me 1 second. Sorry about that. So what's new 4.7 is something that we're going to cover today, and 4.7 is on deck, and it is going to be released soon in the next few weeks. And so you will get a chance to play with it and take it for a ride. So what are some of the themes for 4.7? The themes of 4.7 are, as we continue to add new installer platforms and make improvements to existing ones, and you will see, very soon our assisted installer as an example of those improvements. From a core platform perspective, we have some exciting changes and features in the scheduler, as well as we continue on our journey on OVN, and you'll see OVN IPsec as one of the spotlight features there. Security has always been important for OpenShift and for Red Hat. The CIS Kubernetes benchmark being presented a little later. And then finally, on the workload and stability side, we continue to make improvements to OpenShift GitOps that we introduced in 4.6 and OpenShift pipelines that we introduced even before that, and Helm is now at 3.5, and that is now GA. So we'll hear all about it soon. So one of the things that we talk about here is what's our roadmap looking like. And from a roadmap perspective, you have 4.7, as I mentioned. 4.8 will be we're targeting Q2 of 2021, and then we will potentially have one, if not two more releases in the bottom half of this calendar year. I won't go into the details of this, but as you can see, we have improvements planned for every layer of this stack. Kubernetes, OpenShift 4.7 is based on Kubernetes 1.20, which GA'd on December 8th, 2020. And contrary to recent releases, this release has more alpha than stable enhancements, showing that there is still much to explore in this cloud-native ecosystem and improve. So considering what the world has gone through in 2020, this is such a remarkable achievement for the community to come together to make this 1.20, and so the OpenShift team definitely salutes that. So I'm sure you all agree with me on that. So with that, I will pass the baton on to, these are the OpenShift 4.7 Spotlight features, some select features that we selected as representing some of the highlights of 4.7. We'll go through them first, and then we'll get into kind of the more functional level features that we talk about in these presentations. So with that, I'll hand it over to Moran to talk about the assisted installer.
Hi. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Moran Goldboim. I'm a product manager in Cloud Platform BU. And today I'm going to talk about Assisted Installer. What is Assisted Installer? So Assisted Installer is a web-based service hosted on cloud.redhat.com, made to simplify the flow of deployment OpenShift on bare metal. It is focused on getting a user to an OpenShift cluster up and running with minimal requirements and great UX. 4.7, we are basically going to release it as a tech preview, where the installation method itself is in tech preview, but the clusters successfully installed with it are supported and upgradable, and very much as bare metal API clusters. So let's talk for a minute about the flow. So the focus is really simplified flow. So what the user needs to do, it needs to go to the cloud.redhat.com, generate an ISO, which then it basically take and boot machines with it. The boot media is Arcos plus an agent. The agent calls back home and registers the service. And from that point on, everything is done via the UI. We've got really minimum prerequisites to begin the flow. So we don't need a dedicated bootstrap node, which is really critical on bare metal to save the resources. We actually use one of the masters to pivot them, to pivot it from bootstrap to a master machine. So we've got a 3 nodes minimal cluster to begin with, master and worker combination. So that's the bare minimum compact bare metal clusters, as well as you can add as much workers as you want as part of this flow. We don't need any DHCP hostname allocation, and we've got the option to have a jumpstart VIP allocations, meaning that the agent is basically asking address allocation for the VIPs, for the load balancer VIPs, to make the installation really easy. We also focus on pre-installation validations to make sure that the installation is successful. So before running any OpenShift installation, we make sure that the host meets minimum requirements, that the network connectivity and addresses, metrics, full mesh connectivity is there. NTP is synced, and if not, it has the option to have a chronic config. We have the option to select disk and validating the I/O speed of those disks. So just making sure that everything is ready for the installation. We also kind of provide a smart default configuration to make it really easy, but also changeable if needed. And of course, all the process is actually progress monitor, so you can see the progress of the installation, event and alerts. You have the option to download the logs if something goes wrong, open a bug. If you need the assistant of support. So actually, all in all, we are trying to really wrap the experience. This is something that we brought up this service to air around late September as in a dev preview, and now we are going to advance with it. So 4.7 pre-release installation is actually available today on cloud.redhat.com, so you can go ahead to Assisted Installer and try it out using 4.7 bits. At the bottom, you can see a blog post link, which have kind of a further explanation and overview around the entire process and capabilities, if you are interested. And I think that's it for me today. Thanks, Tushar. Back to you.
Hi, my name is Gaurav Singh. I'm a product manager in OpenShift. I'm going to talk about HPA, horizontal pod autoscaling. It is automatically scaling a pod based on memory utilization. Take an example, think about an application or website, customer-facing website, where suddenly there are a lot of people logging in. Because of that, the memory utilization of the website has increased to 90%. HPA will spin up new parts so that the memory has been spread across and your website is functional without any impact. On the right, what you see is a YAML template where you can specify what is the minimum and maximum scaling. And at the bottom is target average utilization 60. It is a 60%. It could be a definite value like 500 MB and 600 MB. And this 60% is of the pod memory request, not the limit. Next slide, please. Scheduling profile, it's in technology preview. What it is you can customize the default behavior out of the box behavior of OpenShift scheduler with profiles. It comes in two flavors. One is the pre-built profiles. Think about it as best practices. There are 3 pre-built profiles. One is the low node utilization. It will spread the pod evenly across the nodes. Then high node utilization is pack as many pods on a small dedicated nodes. And no scoring is quickly scheduling pod. Think about an application which requires low latency, so it schedules those pods very quickly. On the right, it is build your own profile. Think of it as we give you a bunch of Legos. You put together Legos based on your business need. Every OpenShift scheduler have only one scheduling profile, and one scheduling profile have many plugins, and one plugin has many extension points. So based on this, you can build many logic which maps to your business need. Next slide, please. Scheduler operator, it evicts pods that are scheduled on less desired node in the cluster. Basically what it is any pod that violates your predefined rules are being evicted. There are 3 profiles available today: affinity and thanes, evict pod that do not follow the affinity and thane rule, topology and duplicates, evict duplicate pods and balance it across the node. Then lifecycle and utilization is evict pod which based on pod lifetime value, and evict pod or evict low utilized pod which is being spin up on node which is being dedicated for high density. That's it from me. Next slide and next presenter.
Hello, I'm Erwan Galen, product manager for hardware accelerators. We have collaborated with NVIDIA to allow GPU sharing for OpenShift on virtualized platforms. So to use this feature, your OpenShift worker node should run on a virtual machine supporting virtual GPU like Red Hat OpenStack platform or Red Hat virtualization. Instead of having a parity of 1 pod to 1 physical GPU, you will be able to use up to 16 pods on 1 physical GPU. So this feature could be handy for inference workloads or data scientist notebooks. So the maximum number of vGPU can vary because it could be, for example, 16 vGPUs for the NVIDIA T4 or 10 for the A100. So you can also choose the vGPU memory size on the vGPU sharing technology. You can pick time slice or the new multiple instance GPU. So before using GPU operator with vGPU, you have to install the vGPU host driver on the hypervisor, and you need to set up an NVIDIA license server on your network. Next is Mark.
Great, thanks everyone. So an important feature for OpenShift customers in 4.7, there we go. An important new feature for OpenShift customers in 4.7 is IPsec. So with IPsec, all east-west internode data plane traffic is governed by OVN will be encrypted, and per FIPS requirements, IPsec has enabled that installation time. So this next generation enablement of IPsec is going to improve upon our 3x implementation in several ways. So for one, the specific type and level of encryption will be FIPS compliant. For another, it avoids IPsec between worker and control plane nodes, which already are using HTTPS to meet the requirements of FIPS. Third, while initial 4.7 implementation encrypts all data plane traffic at the node level, implementing IPsec inside of OVN enables future capabilities in the specificity of the internode traffic that will get encrypted. So, for example, we could refine encryption to specific namespace to namespace traffic versus encrypting all the traffic between the nodes. And finally, the way we've implemented it in 4.7 also provides the foundation for supporting hardware offload of IPsec encryption to the smart NICs that we'll support in a future version of OpenShift. So further details about how you would implement IPsec in a 4.7 are included in the notes of this slide. Next slide, please.
OpenShift GitOps is a new add-on that will be OpenShift 4.7, and the idea of OpenShift GitOps is to enable customers to adopt GitOps practices that for driving infrastructure and application operations through Git workflows. So in OpenShift GitOps, customers have access to a supported version of Argo CD, which is the GitOps engine. And through the CR that you can see on the slide, they can define which Git repo should be synced with which cluster, and through that way they can completely rely on the Git provider workflows like pull requests, reviews, commenting, and merge in order to push an application to a large number of clusters connected to a Git repo, or a cluster configuration if you're configuring authentication, for example, on multiple instances of OpenShift, and you want to guarantee they're all looking alike. OpenShift GitOps operator, it will be available in Operator Hub, and once installed, gives a one-click experience for getting access to an Argo CD instance that we recommended to use that instance for cluster configs. And in addition, customers can create other Argo CD instances within the namespaces for application teams. So these are instances that have more limited access to the cluster and focus on driving application deployments and continuous delivery in a declarative manner. They can't install any cluster-wide or cluster or more, like they don't have privileged access to the cluster that they're running on. It has access to, it supports out of the with TP disconnected cluster or restricted networks in both of those scenarios, and we have some guidance on different use cases or different topologies for installing or using Argo CD for different purposes, in addition to the two that were mentioned. Beyond Argo CD, OpenShift GitOps also includes a CLI, OpenShift GitOps Application Manager CLI, abbreviates to CAM, and the purpose of that is to help customers bootstrap a GitOps workflow using Argo CD, using Tekton, and some of the other components in order to simplify adopting GitOps practices. It populates a Git repo basically for them, and configures Argo CD, configures Tekton, the integration points in between them. And this is an area that over the coming months we'll be focusing a lot on getting customers started with that. Next slide, please.
Hi, everyone. Kirsten Newcomer here. Excited to provide an update to you for CIS benchmark for OpenShift. We have been working behind the scenes directly with the Center for Internet Security, CIS, on an OpenShift benchmark. We expect that will be published late January, potentially early February. It has gone through an initial internal review with CIS. In the interim, we have made available the OpenShift 4 hardening guide, which is you'll need to act with Red Hatter to help you get access to that. And once the CIS OpenShift benchmark is published, that will replace the hardening guide. We also now have available for use with 4.6 and then with 4.7 as soon as 4.7 GAs. automated compliance checks with the benchmark that you can implement using the OpenShift compliance operator. We have a link here on the slide to the update that you need to apply for 4.6. And again, these checks will be available through the optional compliance operator in 4.7 and 4.6. Also, we want to announce that Red Hat Advanced Cluster Manager 2.1 is integrated with the OpenShift compliance operator, so you'll be able to leverage that integration for these compliance management across your fleet of clusters. Next slide, please. So for those of you who may not have heard, on January 7th, Red Hat announced its intent to, announced signature of a definitive agreement to acquire StackRox. The acquisition is subject to certain customary closing conditions. So at this time, there's a great deal of public information available to you. There are some links here to the press release at the top and to some blogs and an FAQ at the bottom. StackRox is strategically aligned with Red Hat's view on offering security capabilities that enable full stack solution for enterprise-ready hybrid cloud. The capabilities that you see listed here from StackRox complement Red Hat's layered approach to security, where we focus on integrating security capabilities throughout the stack, throughout the life cycle. And we're really excited about the opportunities that this opens up to expand and refine kube-native security, as well as to shift security left into the container build and CI/CD pipelines as StackRox and Red Hat work together to deliver a cohesive and comprehensive solution to enhance security throughout our offerings and throughout the life cycle. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you very much. Good day, everybody. My name is Hisham Murad. Welcome. I'd like to give you a quick update on what's new in Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management 2.2. So ACM 2.2 will be releasing on March 4th. And ACM in general has four main pillars, if you will. I'm going to touch on each of those pillars as I touch on these three main bullets here. So one of the things we introduced in the prior release is actually being able to really manage OpenShift everywhere. And we continue to expand that theme for our customers. So it doesn't matter where their OpenShift clusters live, they're able to manage it. We introduced bare metal as well as vSphere in the prior release, and in 2.2, we're excited to announce that we're also supporting Azure Red Hat OpenShift as well as OpenShift dedicated, again, being able to manage that OpenShift clusters regardless of where they live. And on that same theme, if you will, we're actually, as a tech preview, integrating Submariner as part of this. Why is this important for our customers? Because what we're doing is we're enabling this secure communication between clusters, but from an application perspective, now our customers are going to be able to deploy modern applications that will span clusters, span data centers, and even span providers as well. So incredibly powerful thing that we're bringing here for our customers. Now, at the heart and soul of what we do from a Red Hat perspective is all about open source. And we want to continue to expand and embrace open source. So as part of the compliance, and what Kirsten just talked about is the integration of the compliance operator. Well, with the 2.2 release, we continue to enhance that as well. And we want to make sure that OpenSCAP scanning and that security scanning that you can perform using that operator against your clusters, you're now able to surface that information into the ACM UI and have that unified, centralized visibility of that as well. Another thing that we're bringing in as a tech preview is we're integrating the Kubernetes Integrity Shield. This is all about resource assurance, making sure that the integrity and authenticity of all the Kubernetes resources and images and containers are valid. So that's also very important. That touches on our governance and risk and security and compliance aspect of, or pillar, if you will, of ACM. Now, another area that's really important is GitOps, right? GitOps is really now a methodology that's used very widely across developers and has been for some time. So we now have actually integrated Argo CD. Argo CD is widely used by many, many users and many, many customers to deploy applications. Because of this integration with ACM, we're now able to surface all the OpenShift managed clusters to the Argo CD users. So now they can, with confidence, deploy to these securely managed ACM OpenShift clusters. So again, continuing to expand and enhance that story, and that really expands our application lifecycle management story as well. Lastly, observability is one of those key 4 pillars that we have in ACM, and we're continuing to expand that. Customers want to know that these clusters are healthy. They're not experiencing any performance degradation. They want that visibility. So now customers are able to actually choose which metrics that are meaningful for them and be able to actually customize those allow lists. What does that mean? That means from a Grafana perspective, you are now able to build custom dashboards, and in those dashboards you have the different panels where you're able to present and showcase all those metrics that are really important for the customers. So making it more and more meaningful for them. And at the end of the day, it's really all about making the customers' lives easier in terms of the multi-Kubernetes cluster management. Last point is we have so much more detail that's coming on this. It's going to be on OneStop very quickly. So please go visit OneStop soon, and we'll have some more details, both in a messaging document as well as a PowerPoint presentation on all these topics. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this is Sergio Khan, the product manager for cost management. We've worked a lot in the last release. You have it available today, and it will be updated through 4.7 and onboarding experience for OCP clusters. So in the past, we were using operator metering. Right now, there's a new operator. It's called Cocoa Metrics until we certified that it will happen during 4.7. With only one configuration file, 1-2 minutes, now you can have it. And we have reduced by 1,000 the resources that you need to get it running. So we get the same information we got before, easier and really with better maintenance. And the other thing we are delivering through 4.7 is we're going to support it in RGAP scenarios. So there will be an update in a few weeks where you will be able to get your RGAP cluster, gather the information, and upload that to the SaaS service to be processed. Next slide, please. So right now there's 2 operators. The new one will be available. The 35 version will have another name. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we've changed some additional things in the tool. So if you go now, you will see that you can filter out tags in the different sources we support. That was important. We have customers with 1 tag and more than 1.5 million values, and that was basically making it really hard to use the tool. Right now, you can select which tags are going to be used. For OpenShift, you basically select the ones you want to include in your interface. For Amazon and Azure, by default, all of them are selected because you already do that in your cloud, but you can deselect one or several of them if you don't need them or you think they're misleading. We also enhance the cost model with level-based rates. So right now, if you want to put a price on storage and you want to differentiate between different type of storage, so it's more pricey to use a gold tier than using a bronze tier, you can use a label in your storage or in your nodes, and we will use that. And of course, in order to do that too, we support default rates. So if you label something at default, if we don't find any of the tags that you have configured, we would use the default. So we cover many of the use cases. And the other thing is, one request we were getting a lot from customers is enhancement to our back that come with the platform. So right now you can fine tune your visibility. So you can select one group and define exactly what resources are available. Do you want to see a cluster? Do you want to see an account? You can limit that visibility to one group. So you don't have access to everything that we have in the database. You only get access to whatever you are entitled to use. And the other thing that it's nice coming along with that is that now there's a specific role to create sources that you don't need to be an org admin to create new sources. You delegate the role and the user will be able to create new sources for cost management. And that's all. Next slide and next presenter.
Hey, Jake Lucky here. So I just want to talk about managed OpenShift, and really the first thing I want to touch on is that from the managed OpenShift side, we really want to highlight the fact that OpenShift is a single product with multiple consumption models. Go ahead and go to the next slide, actually. So if we skip over to the next slide, so one thing that we're going to be doing in the OpenShift 4.7 timeframe, actually back to the previous slide there, sorry. In the OpenShift 4.7 timeframe, from the OpenShift Cluster Manager side, we really want to emphasize that. So when you go into OpenShift Cluster Manager, we want to give you, all the different ways that you can create OpenShift, whether you're going to be creating a new cluster with OCP on bare metal, maybe using the assisted installer, whether you're creating an OpenShift dedicated cluster, or whether you're creating a ROX cluster on IBM Cloud. So what you're going to start to see in the experience in OpenShift Cluster Manager is you'll be able to log in, you'll be able to create a cluster, you'll see all the different ways you can create a cluster, and you'll actually be able to register your Arrow clusters and your ROX clusters back to your cluster list. So you have a true multi-cluster view across all of your OpenShift clusters, no matter where they're deployed. Next slide. Now, from the OpenShift dedicated and the Red Hat OpenShift service on the ABS side, we have actually quite a few updates coming here in the 4.7 timeframe. And keep in mind, managed OpenShift, when we say OpenShift 4.7, we mean 4.7 timeframe. These are features coming in that timeframe, not with OpenShift 4.7. So we have a new UI for scheduling cluster updates. So you can basically tell us if you want your cluster to automatically update when there's a new OpenShift Z stream available. You can basically set a maintenance window for that, what time and day do you want that to happen on. You can do manual updates. You can basically set policies around, if how you want your nodes to drain when updates happen. We have auto scaling coming at the cluster level. So you'll basically be able to set auto scaling at both at the cluster level and at the machine pool level. So we have this concept in OpenShift Dedicated and Red Hat OpenShift, the ROSA service, that you can basically create machine pools rather than machine sets. So machine pools are basically a multi-AZ machine set. So starting in the 4.7 timeframe, you'll be able to actually create machine pools with different instance types. Previously, you're restricted only to a single instance type. Now you can use mixed instance types on your OpenShift Dedicated and ROSA clusters, and you can set auto scaling on those pools. You'll also be able to install into an existing VPC on AWS with your OSD or ROSA cluster. You'll be able to use larger instance sizes all the way up to 96 vCPU and 768 gigabytes of memory. I believe that's the memory optimized 24x large. We also have customer notifications. So basically tied to the OCM cluster history log. So OCM tracks changes to your cluster version or any other changes that a cluster owner might make to the cluster at the OCM layer. Also tracks if SRE is doing support casework on your cluster, you'll basically get a notification, and you can set your notification preferences on cloud.redhat.com. Lastly, we wanted to call out bring your own key disk encryption, feature available in OCP on AWS. We're bringing that to any OSD or ROSA clusters. You'll be able to use bring your own key disk encryption for basically the OS disks and persistent volumes. Next slide. So on Arrow, on Azure Red Hat OpenShift, our big focus there is still on getting Microsoft Azure Government available, so basically expanding into the Azure Government region. We still have a lot of work happening around that. That should be coming maybe 4.7 timeframe. We might start seeing like preview customers in 4.7 timeframe, maybe 4.8, maybe more realistic for when we see a GA on that. Egress lockdown. So basically the ability to restrict outbound traffic from your cluster. We should have that coming in the near future here. So just like with OSD and Rosa on ABS, bring your own key disk encryption is another feature that we're working very hard to get released on Arrow. And then larger VM sizes there as well. One of the things that you should see sooner on the Arrow side would be the cluster create GUI. So basically you'll be able to log into the Azure portal and actually use the Azure Web Console to set up a new cluster and set all of your configuration and preferences there. And I think that's it. That's it for me. I'll hand it over to Daniel.
Thank you, Jake. Let's talk about workloads. I'm Daniel Messer. I'm the product manager for the operator framework, which is the foundation for all our workload operators on OpenShift. For the operator lifecycle manager, our on-cluster component, 4.7 was mostly a bug fix release. So we went a lot into fixing issues with the product and bring in stability improvements. But one thing that we also put in as a new feature is for operators to communicate their readiness to be updated. This is in order to make operator updates themselves more reliable and robust, and obviously not something you would see when the operator is in a critical situation. So a critical operation, for instance, might be a live migration of a virtual machine in OpenShift virtualization, or the restoration of a database from a backup. So in these instances with 4.7, an operator can now raise the flag and can say it's not upgradable, and the lifecycle manager will hold any pending update, either manually or automatically approved, until the operator leaves the critical phase and sets the upgradable flag again to true. So this should help with building up confidence with cluster administrators to update operators as often as possible. Next slide. The Operator SDK is now a supported offering in OpenShift 4.7. That means our ISV partners and customers writing operators can now rely on a supported official downstream release of the SDK with all the branding that they can get from redhat.com, and obviously also get support for. And on top of that, we are now at version 1.3 of the Operator SDK, which brings a lot of improvements in terms of automating the packaging as well as the testing. So with a single command, you can now test and package your operator for OLM and see if it can be deployed and managed by OLM. The SDK also supports the webhook integration that OLM offers. So operators that are using admission webhooks or COD conversion webhooks are usually a little bit harder to install because the cluster admin needed to go up front into the system and register those webhooks, put TLS certificates in place, and make sure they are rotated. And this is now all being done by OLM since the last release, and the required metadata for that is also now scaffolded automatically with the SDK. The aforementioned operator conditions, setting upgraded readiness to false and true, is now also something that the SDK can natively make use of. And last but not least, the new bundle format that we introduced in the last release is something that the SDK can now scaffold and create automatically, all to the point that it really just takes one command to do the whole bundle metadata and catalog creation, which should help our customers to do this actually as part of their pipelines and continuously test their operator on OpenShift with OLM. With that, over to the next slide to Karina on an update on Helm.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm Karina Angel, and we are further complementing our operator story with Helm charts. So more package management, more ways to bring workloads to OpenShift. And if you are especially a Helm shop and are using a lot of Helm charts, you will be excited for Helm 3.5 support. So Helm 3.5 is a feature release. Go to helm.sh and go look at all the great new features in Helm 3.5. Also, we will be allowing you to configure multiple repositories. So if your development environment uses multiple repositories, or there are repositories out there that you would like to pull into your OpenShift environment, and now do that. And support for disconnected environments. You can pull down the default repo and allow yourself to use your Helm charts in a disconnected environment or air gap mode. Also now, if your team does not want to see the default repository, you can remove that. We will not force you to see the Helm charts. The operator, the OpenShift Developer Console team, has also been working on a lot of great new features. So not only can you use Helm through the CLI, you can also go into the console and deploy Helm charts. First, I want to highlight that we do have an example Quarkus Helm chart for you to deploy, and you can go and copy that and use it how you wish and pull it into your own repo. You can also select a different version. If you're using different versions for your Helm charts, now you can select which one to install, as well as filter out any Helm charts that are not compatible to your OpenShift release. Another big thing is form-based value creation. Instead of having to go change your YAML, now you can do it in the form. Again, the theme is simplifying this for your developers. And now you can see the topology view for your Helm charts as well. Now you can visualize. I also want to point out that Argo CD, we've been talking a lot about GitOps, as was mentioned by CMAC as well as the ACM team. Argo CD does support Helm charts, so remember that. Next slide, please. The Red Hat Application Services team, since we are talking about workloads, formerly known as middleware, of course, has been doing a lot of work on making it easier to bring your middleware and application services to OpenShift. I want to highlight that the runtimes team, we have been announcing lots of great Quarkus enhancements, and Quarkus is your cloud-native Java development runtime. So now within the console, you have quick starts, which will be mentioned later in this presentation, to get you up and running more quickly, as well as I mentioned, the example Helm chart, so that you can go deploy Quarkus from your developer console. Go to the Helm repository, and you will find an example Helm chart there. Also, integration with serverless functions, which is Dev Preview, that Nano will be talking about later as well. Would also like to highlight that EAP now has runnable jars, again, making it faster and quicker for you to run your applications and get you up and running. And for all you Spring Boot users, not only support for UBI support for Java 8 and 11, but decorate build hooks, again, making it easier for you. So that's Tech Preview. Please play with it. Give us all your feedback. All right, the Red Hat integration team, Jake was talking about OpenShift Dedicated and all the great new enhancements. Another thing that you can use in OpenShift Dedicated is the managed API service, that is GA. So go play with that. And of course, lots of manageability enhancements. The Red Hat process automation team, we have been talking a lot about Cogito. Cogito is upstream cloud-native process automation. So PAM 7.10 is the first release with that technology, and you'll see even more coming out. But play with that again, and the new dashboard builder. So lots of great stuff coming out of the Red Hat application services. And now on to Peter Lauterbach for OpenShift virtualization.
Thanks, Karina. So OpenShift virtualization is the ability to run VMs inside of OpenShift based on the upstream KubeVirt. We've actually been working with some very strategic customers to do things like create hybrid applications of legacy VMs like enterprise databases and connect them to their cloud native development. And then some other folks are doing some very, what I would call advanced stuff using ephemeral with those VMs inside of say, developer pipelines, right? So there's lots of different use cases here. What we've done is we want to make it super easy, just as you've done on your existing virtual platforms, to just create a catalog of VMs based on golden images that have been blessed by the operating systems teams, and developers can deploy those with 1 or 2 clicks. We've also got some quick starts that are very capable guides that step you through the process of doing something in time, real with the console. Right? So it steps you through and guides you and helps you learn the product easier. One of the other things we've got coming as well is some sizing guidance. Once you get through running a couple of virtual machines and you want to start scaling and deploying across your cluster, and what does that look like? The other thing that we've focused on is UX throughout the entire product. So the ability to get the operator to create VMs in your OpenShift cluster, I think is now down to 3 or 4 clicks. It's very frictionless. It's easy to deploy and easy to update. You can create virtual machines on a subset of nodes, where if you want to make sure you restrict it for, say, hardware, say you've got GPUs or something like that, and connect it that way. Last time we talked, we did have a robust virtual machine performance benchmarks running enterprise databases, testing out the performance of KubeVirt itself. And now we've been working very closely with the OCS team, making sure that as you deploy large VMs with databases inside them, that you get both the performance and scale that you would expect on either bare metal or a virtualized platform. But then you can also take advantage of the performance optimizations that OCS brings in terms of snapshotting and data protection. One other thing I want to talk about is that we've done virtualization validation with Microsoft. This has actually been the case since we actually GA'd the product several releases ago. So anything that's supported from Windows 2012 R2 onwards, all the way up to Windows 10, is a supported, validated configuration, not only from Red Hat, but from Microsoft as well. There's been a lot of work done in the storage area in terms of performance for pre-allocation of disks, where this is an optimization you might make for something like a large database. And then the data protection work that I mentioned earlier. We've started with offline virtual machine snapshots, and then you'll see some future work coming in terms of online snapshots and additional capabilities in conjunction with the work that the OCS team is doing. On the network side, we've actually got 2 things. One fell off the list here. We've got a tech preview capability to allow you to run a dual stack IPv4 and IPv6 for the VMs inside your cluster. And then we've actually been working very closely with our ecosystem partners. As you know, OpenShift virtualization takes advantage of networking and storage abstractions. So we've been working with partners like Tigera and their Calico product to make sure that that it's easy not only to use those products in OpenShift with containers, but with virtual machines as well. And we look forward to working with our other partners in networking and storage to make sure that users get the best experience, even if they're using virtual machines. I'm going to turn it over now to Jamie to talk about Service Mesh.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Longmuir. Last November, we released Service Mesh 2.0, and that'll continue to be the latest supported version of Service Mesh on OpenShift 4.7. Service Mesh is based on Istio, or I should say, Service Mesh 2 is based on Istio 1.6. Our team always performs a lot of extra testing and validation on new releases of Istio, and so we're usually a version or so behind the fast-moving upstream project. It's worth noting, due to the substantial changes between 1.1 and 2, we strongly recommend that new users start with Service Mesh 2. Next slide, please. So while we don't have a new major release of Service Mesh, we do have a few updates to provide. Most notably, Service Mesh now supports OVN Kubernetes networking, which was GA'd in OCP 4.6. The team is also very close to declaring support for Service Mesh on Power and System Z hardware. Finally, while Service Mesh is already supported on FIPS-enabled OpenShift clusters, we hope to declare that Service Mesh will be officially FIPS validated soon. FIPS ensures that your applications are running using a well-defined, secure, and reliable set of cryptographic functions, as validated by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or the NIST. One of our most notable differences between OpenShift Service Mesh and upstream Istio is our use of OpenSSL for encryption. This allows us to declare Service Mesh as FIPS validated once the applicable version of RHEL OpenSSL receives its validation from NIST. And so we're just holding on for that. The next version of OpenShift Service Mesh will be 2.1, I should say the next major version. That will focus on Service Mesh Federation and more. Next slide. Finally, the team's getting closer to declaring official support for Service Mesh 2.0 on our managed OpenShift offerings. So OpenShift Dedicated, Azure, Red Hat OpenShift, and Red Hat OpenShift on AWS. Service Mesh will be supported as an unmanaged add-on for these platforms, meaning that customers will install and manage Service Mesh in the same manner that they would on OCP, with access to the same support channels available. Thanks, everyone. I'll now hand it over to Naina, who will talk about OpenShift serverless functions.
Thank you, Jamie. As you all know, that OpenShift serverless packages and extends Knative, and now with eventing as GA and functions as step preview since serverless 1.11 release. We wanted to share what is new in serverless 1.12. So similar to the previous releases, 1.12 updates the serverless product release to upstream matching version for Knative, serving, eventing, CLI, etc., which is 0.18.x. In addition to various bug fixes, this release changes the minimum Kubernetes version requirement to 1.17. Another thing to note is the net contour project that enables contour is now in stable state. Dev preview of functions runtimes now boasts the addition of Spring Boot as an available runtime in addition to Quarkus Node and Go, as you can see in the top right corner. And in regards to eventing developer experience through Dev Console, now in addition to use of KNCLI, users can use Dev Console to create channels and subscriptions, and can also add triggers to brokers. And this could really aid the users in creating and visualizing event-driven applications. And you can see the glimpse at the bottom right. We have also added the integration with Service Mesh 2.0. And I guess that's missing from the slide. I thought I updated it. Anyway, so that's about it for this release. And for further information, please refer to our release notes, facts, and on OneStop. Next, Syamuk would be covering CI/CD GitOps. So Syamuk, please take it away.
Thank you, Naina. So for CI/CD and GitOps, they're offering an OpenShift. There are really three pieces that addresses different levels of complexity of continuous delivery. There's OpenShift builds that focuses on building container images on the cluster from source code or Docker file or binary and other use cases. There is OpenShift pipelines that focuses on CI and more of the push-based OpenShift GitOps that we briefly talked about. Next slide, please. On 4.7, we have a new release of OpenShift Pipelines 1.3 that brings Takedown 0.19. Some of the capabilities in OpenShift Pipeline 1.3 is that we have reduced the privileges that the pipelines have, both the controllers and the pipeline itself that is executing. And in the next release, we actually will reduce that even further, taking advantage of the user launching pod and user namespace that is coming also in OpenShift 4.7. Cluster-wide configs that if a customer configures them on the cluster, OpenShift pipeline will consume them and pass them to the pipelines and task-run pods as well. HTTPS support for webhooks is in our area, so we can have end-to-end integrations for webhooks that are exposed for each pipeline. This is an RFP that comes from the customer. And another area that you will see more also in the following versions, more automation around, is that we work a lot to reduce the amount of resources, number of pods for event listeners, so that one event listener can be used across the entire cluster or across multiple related namespaces. The enhancements on the task library that is shipped with OpenShift Pipeline is that now it is try and build a task, expose a result containing the image digest of the image that was just built in that task, that it can consume in the following tasks in the pipeline for deployment, for example. You don't have to go on the tags that are inaccurate, and you can use a specific digest of the image and deploy it within the pipeline. There are also numerous enhancements in the Dev Console, the UI experience of pipelines. There is metrics tab is added. As you can see on the slide, there's like the success failure ratio of the pipeline runs for a particular pipeline, average time that it takes over time, over various days, so you can identify anomalies, also for task runs as well. There is a task run tab to make it really easy to navigate from a pipeline run to the task runs that are generated for that pipeline run, to be able to dig deeper and for debugging purposes or more insight in what's happening inside of execution of a pipeline. An events tab is added that is hugely beneficial when you're debugging a pipeline. So it's a collection, aggregation of all the events that are coming out of a specific pipeline run, all the task runs that are related to that pipeline run, or any of the pods that are related to those task runs. So if something goes wrong and you don't see it in the logs, there's a very high chance that you would find it in the events tab of that particular pipeline run. And some minor updates are also in the logs for pipeline. You can there's a button to download the logs if you want to further analyze them. Next slide, please. On the tooling side, the Tekton CLI, the IDE plugins, that is VS Code extension and IntelliJ. We have now integration with Tekton Hub for searching and installing tasks. Tekton Hub is a central hub under hub.tekton.dev for discovering, searching for tasks, reusable tasks that you can use for authoring pipeline. It's a project that we launched a while back within the community, and it was actually just recently came out of preview. Now we have integration across our tooling that you don't have to lose your context, leave the CLI or leave VS Code or IntelliJ to search for and install tasks. Right from there, you can install it. You can also, in the VS Code, install the task as a cluster task if you want to share the task across the entire cluster. There is improvement in the code compilation in VS Code. You can see on the screen, for example, that the variable compilation includes results from other tasks, and the context variables are available inside a pipeline. Support for creating PVCs is added. When you're starting a pipeline in VS Code, it's a very common scenario that someone wants to start a pipeline that has a workspace, but you don't already have created a PVC that you can use with that pipeline run. So on the spot, on the fly, you can create a PVC and start your pipeline run. And a very useful capability added is about notifications as well, that the pipelines that you have open within your workspace in VS Code, as you execute pipeline runs and they fail or succeed, you would get notification popping up at the bottom, notifying you about the result of execution of that pipeline. Next slide, please. GitHub, we have a partnership with GitHub, which was announced in the beginning of December, about a month ago at GitHub Universe. You can read about a press release and the blog that explains further on what is planned, what is coming in a couple of months. The part that is already out is GitHub Actions, which makes it really simple to create GitHub workflows inside GitHub that interact with OpenShift. There are a number of tasks that are already available inside the GitHub marketplace by Red Hat. They are all verified, and there are more planned that would come along. There are more integration plans with GitHub Runner and eventually GitHub Enterprise running on OpenShift, but it's an area that is developing to bring OpenShift more into the GitHub ecosystem, and the GitHub workflows that are taking traction are popular among the GitHub users. Next slide.
So, hi folks, I'm David Harris. Talk about developer tooling. So we're always looking at new ways to help developers create and deploy applications on OpenShift, and accompanying the 4.7 release, we've got some great new updates to our portfolio of developer tools and technology, starting off with this exciting new offering, the Developer Sandbox. So this reduces friction for developers by instantly providing a reasonably sized private OpenShift environment for creating and deploying applications all at zero cost. So you can fully explore the default developer experience that comes out of the box with OpenShift and see how easy it is to take source code and have it running in a container. Developers can create new Quarkus-based applications, connect them with a database running in their private environment, send links to their team members to provide feedback on as they iterate through it. The sandbox also includes code-ready workspaces, so you can even do this inner-loop development all hosted on OpenShift itself. To get started with this, it is available now. You just need to head over to developers.redhat.com/developer-sandbox. Next slide, please. So the service binding. So service binding, it enables dynamic discovery and configuration between microservices and the services that they depend on. So for example, a Java application can easily connect to a Kafka instance without having to manually configure secrets, etc. This dynamic approach also makes things a lot simpler as you start to move applications between environments, so where services or the addresses of things may change. It's an open specification which Red Hat and a number of partners have been collaborating on, and it's looking to provide a standardized approach across the Kubernetes ecosystem, thus making it easier for both consumers and producers or providers of services. As of December, the service binding operator is available on Operator Hub. And as we progress towards GA, both of the specification and the operator, hopefully this will be in the second quarter, we're enhancing with important updates such as to protect against privilege escalations. Next slide, please. Code-ready workspaces is based on the Eclipse-Che upstream project. It provides Kubernetes native development environments, all hosted on OpenShift. It's great for fast onboarding onto projects and collaboration with everything you need in a consistent and reproducible environment. There's some exciting new updates either side of the 4.7 release. So with code-ready workspaces, we have this capability where you can quickly start a workspace by simply appending the location of a repository in GitHub to the URL of your instance. In 2.6, we're expanding our support of this capability to also include public and private repositories in Bitbucket. Then in 2.7, we're looking to improve what is often the first-time experience where you haven't fully configured a workspace yet, to automatically recommend and include plugins so that you get better IntelliSense out of the box. And next slide, please. We provide a whole host of client-side tooling for developers. Here we're picking out a few examples. Firstly, Odeo. This is our CLI, which abstracts Kubernetes and makes it simpler for developers to create and deploy new microservices. In version 2 of that, we switched to introducing a new dev file version 2 format for creating components. And since then, we've updated both of our IDE plugins, the OpenShift connector for VS Code and IntelliJ, as well as CodeReady Studio, which is our Eclipse-based desktop IDE to leverage this new capability in Odeo. Within Odeo itself, as well as an update to support service binding 0.3, the latest updates have been focused on improving the documentation to help users get started and be more productive, and expanding the support of this new dev file v2 specification. In the OpenShift connector, we'll be looking to provide simpler access to the new developer sandbox that we mentioned earlier, like we already do with CodeReady containers. And with CodeReady Studio, our upcoming release it includes new support for versions of Wildfly and EAP. Next slide, please. So CodeReady Containers allows developers to run a local instance of OpenShift on their laptops. In the latest update, we've made some more memory available for end-user applications, and we're continuing to work on reducing the overall requirements for CRC. We have also added system trays on Windows and Mac to help you easily configure CRC. And there's a new installer for Mac to streamline the installation process and the delivery of assigned binary. We're also introducing new telemetry, and this will help us to better understand usage patterns and errors, hopefully to make CRC even better. And that's it from me. I'd like to pass to Daniel.
Thank you. A quick update on Quay 3.4. Quay 3.4 was originally planned to be a maintenance-only release, will be released in the beginning of February. This was mainly due to the fact that we were doing a Python v2 to Python v3 migration for the entire code base, and this required a lot of retesting. Still, the team managed to slip a couple of interesting features in, one of which is that you can now download Quay like pretty much any other Red Hat product. There are official images going to be available for 3.4 for Quay, Claire, and all the operators. So no more downloading from Quay.io with a shared secret. Next slide. Speaking of operator, we have a completely rewritten Quay operator that is managing Quay on OpenShift, and it gives customers this batteries included experience that many users have been asking and waiting for. So the new operator will deploy a completely managed Quay registry, including all the required databases, key value stores, and storage. Storage specifically is based on Nuba, which comes as part of the OCS operator, and this provides us a non-HA S3 endpoint based on local storage, fulfilling the often cited requirement for Quay to also work on local storage. Obviously, customers can opt out of all these managed services, with obviously the exception of Quay and Claire, and provide alternatives, like for instance, for storage using the Red Hat OCS offering with the OCS operator. The Quay operator is also now level 2, meaning it can update Quay itself to the next version, and it will also be able to migrate existing Quay deployments with the previous Quay setup operator used up until version 3.3. On the next slide, one feature that got introduced is builders. Builders allow Quay to build your container images by integrating with source code management systems like Bitbucket, GitHub, or GitLab. This is a tech preview feature we are introducing with Quay, and in the first iteration, it will work by launching a containerized virtual machine and execute your container build via Builder. For that, you need a bare metal cluster as of today. This does not have to be the same cluster where Quay and the operator is running. It can be an external cluster, and it's obviously also covered by the infrastructure policy, meaning there's no subscription required. In the future, we want to alleviate the need for a bare metal cluster and use some of the awesome build tooling you have heard about earlier based on OpenShift pipelines. And on the next slide, last but not least, Claire v4 finally graduates out of tech preview. This is the component in Quay that does all the image scanning, and this is now the default for Quay as of version 3.4. It supports now reporting many more vulnerabilities, also from programming language package managers. We are starting with Python here, but obviously going to expand with Golang, Node, and Java. And Claire v4 can also now be part of a disconnected installation like Quay 3.4 as well, due to the use of offline media for vulnerability databases. And that's it for Quay. Over to Ali for news on the console.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm going to focus on OpenShift console now, where we have 4 main themes: developing on Kubernetes, learning, extending, and managing. We've done a lot of great work in the console and 4.7 across these themes, and Ali and I are going to highlight some of those today. As Nina mentioned previously, we've added a lot of serverless features to the OpenShift console. The console now has support for brokers and channels. In the first image on the left, we're showing the ad page, where users have the ability to create both brokers and channels. Once created, these resources are displayed in topology, and staying in line with our visually guided focus and keeping things simple. In addition to allowing creation of subscriptions and triggers from action menus, we enable drag and drop to quickly and easily initiate these actions from within topology. We've also enhanced our event source creation flow. Since event sources are CRs, we changed our experience to be a catalog-based experience to help deal with scalability of the number of event sources. So in the screenshot in the bottom right-hand side, you can see that users can view event sources along with other objects in the service catalog, or they can click directly into the event source type and drill into a more focused catalog specifically on event sources. When the Red Hat integration CamelK operator is installed, our CamelK connectors will also be shown in that catalog. And finally, we've made some changes in the admin perspective around serverless. We now have a serverless primary nav item containing 2 nav items. The first one is focused on serving resources and the second on eventing. Users can find event sources, brokers, triggers, channels, and subscriptions in that eventing section. Don't forget, these items are still accessible in the admin perspective as well, since the topology view is also available in admin. On the next slide, I'm going to focus on the developer catalog, which is our one-stop shop for developers to get quickly started. In 4.7, we've improved this experience, enabling a consistent experience across catalogs while also exposing additional features as needed. When entering the developer catalog, the catalog has the ability to view all content in a single catalog. We provide a number of subcatalogs by default: the builder images, Helm charts, operator back services, and samples. But other subcatalogs are available based on operator install, such as event sources and VMs in 4.7. And in the future, we'll see more coming in. The catalog experience is more contextual when drilling into those subcatalogs, exposing features and filters that are specific to that type. So for an example, the Helm chart catalog, when you drill into that specifically, you're able to filter specifically by that Helm chart repositories if you have multiples. Something that customers have been asking for quite a bit is the ability to modify the available categories in the developer catalog. So there's an area on the top left-hand side around with categories. And we now provide this capability for the administrator. We've added a customization section in the console operator resource, so admins can use the YAML snippet shown on the right-hand side to add the default categories to start with and then customize them from there. Finally, I'd like to share some cool new things in topology on the next screen. First and foremost, we now have persistent storage for user preferences in the console. This is super exciting because that sets a stage for us to persist layouts in topology, which has been something that's been requested quite a bit. So we now have that in 4.7. That means you can enter your topology view for a specific project, move your components and nodes around, leave the project, come back, leave the entire console and come back, and it will all be persisted. So that's great news there. One of my favorite features in 4.7 is the new quick add in topology, which is shown in this image here. It allows developers to quickly search for an item from the catalog directly from topology, from the icon in the top left-hand side of the bar, the quick bar, and you don't have to change context. So as the user starts to type, matches are shown. Users could click on the matches and see a quick overview in the right-hand panel. And when they find the one they want, they can just click on the CTA to install it. Again, don't forget, even though we're showing topology in the developer perspective, it's also available in admin as well as in the home section of the project page. Now I'm going to pass over to Ali to continue with more of the 4.7 console features.
Thanks, Serena. So OpenShift console now has quick starts. That was introduced in 4.6. Quick starts are essentially our in-console guided experience. So new in 4.7, we've made this extensible. What does that mean? That means now our partners, our customers can go and create their own quick start experiences that are going to be built in right into the console. We've made this super simple, and we focus this by a couple of things. First, we provide an excellent default sample right into the console. So if you go into the console and go and create a console quick start CRD, there'll be a default example like showing you everything you need to do to create it. On top of that, we provided a quick start guidelines, right? This is going to come in and tell you how to create good content, the formatting, and essentially just give you an overview and feel of how to create a really good quick start. So we feel like this is a very important piece to help educate users. So again, like if you're an operator and you want to come in and create a quick start to guide your users to come in and deploy some kind of sample app or show some really cool functionality, the quick start is for you. A couple of nice additions that we also had in 4.7 for quick starts is we've added the ability to do hints. So hints will allow us to highlight certain sections of the UI. Again, just making it a little bit easier to guide your users through the quick start. And finally, in 4.7, we introduced a bunch of new quick starts, right? So the OCS, the OpenShift Container Storage team added quick starts, virtualization team did. You'll see some new ones for Helm charts, Quarkus, Spring Boot. So a ton of great content coming in 4.7. So look out for that. Next slide, please. All right, it's finally happened, people. 4.7, we're getting internationalization. What does that mean? That means we're going to have support for Chinese, Japanese, Korean in 4.7. As you notice in the screenshot, you'll now see a language preference dropdown that will be under the user menu. Again, also, what does that mean for internationalization? That means all the client code that is in the console, we've translated it We've also translated and localized all dates and time. It doesn't mean anything from the back end coming back from the Cube API or anything is going to be translated as well, just all client-side code. On top of that, in 4.7, we've also done improvements on accessibility, another key piece that's important for us. We've enhanced our ability to work with screen readers. You know, accessibility is super important. We want to make this product available to as many people as possible, and with these accessibility improvements, we can do that. I added a couple links here to some interesting blogs about our process of doing it, so if you're curious, take a look, please. Next slide, please. Also new to 4.7, we've improved our monitoring and graphing capabilities. So now we have the ability to do stacked graphs, and then on top of that, we've added enhanced tooltips. So at any point in time, you can go ahead and select somewhere in the chart, and we will give you the values of all items in that chart. This is a small improvement, but an important one. It's all about improving the usability and understanding your environment. So we're super excited to get this out, and you know, we'll keep improving our monitoring stack every release. Next slide, please. All right, so finally today, I want to talk about our operator hub, specifically catalog sources. This is the mechanism used to populate the operators into the operator hub. We've added additional UI to make this easier. So now if you go to cluster admin section, operator hub, to the configs, you'll have the ability to come in and disable or enable any of the default operator hubs that come with the product. We've also added a nice UX around additional catalog sources. So again, you could come in and edit configurations via UI, not the YAML, and we also surface a lot of key statuses for you. And then finally, when you go to your catalog source, you could actually select each one, and you'll see which operators that this catalog source brings in, right? So out of the box, we provide you a bunch of different catalog sources, but you could yourself add additional operator catalog sources that will populate your operator hub. So really nice functionality to improve that experience. All right, next slide, please. And I'm going to pass it off to you, Christian, I believe. Thanks, everybody.
Need to come off mute.
I'm sorry. Hey everyone. So there is not a lot to talk about observability today. Only a brief announcement for logging. With OpenShift 4.7, logging will continue on an independent release cycle to the OpenShift container platform. With that, we better align ourselves with other layered products such as Service Mesh, Serverless, and others. So what it literally means is that with OpenShift 4.7, we will continue on the logging 5.0. Don't be confused about the major version. It is really important to know that we don't really change anything. We don't remove any features. We don't add any features. 5.0 is just because we have been releasing under OpenShift, so 4.6, 4.7, 4.5, ... So it was just the next iteration, basically, as we go to 5.0, and then we will continue with minor versions, 5.1, 5.2. As I said already, this is no change to how you receive support, no change to, introduce new SKU. It will still be available under OCP. All the features are still supported that we currently support. This is really largely a repackaging exercise. But some of the notable changes, which I believe are benefits for customers here, is that with 5.0, what you will see is more choice on how you want to consume logging. So if you go to Operator Hub, there will be a few more channels like Stable and Tech Preview, and you can basically, choose how and what to use. We will also go into a more feature-based release cadence to be a little bit more flexible to how and what customers need. And there will be also like an individual support metrics. So you know that with Service Mesh and servers and pipelines and so on. So that means, with logging, we will not be able to only support one OCP release, but, potentially multiple OCP releases. For EOS, Here, same topic. We will not change anything. With every EOS release, you will get one minor version of logging that will be supported for the entire EOS support lifecycle. More information will definitely come in time for the OpenShift 4.7 release, so watch out on blogs, on our blogs and so on. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm going to cover this section on behalf of Catherine, who couldn't make it today. For OpenShift 4, there are two primary installation experiences: the full stack automation, what is known as IPI, and the pre-existing infrastructure. And this you all probably are familiar with. It just shows you what is now supported with 4.7. Moving to the next slide, this is the support. With 4.7, we introduced support for the installer for the AWS Commercial Cloud Services, or C2S. The installation process is largely the same as deploying it to AWS GovCloud. The AWS C2S region must be manually configured in the installed config, since Red Hat CoreOS images aren't published to that region, and the Red Hat CoreOS armies must be manually uploaded by the user to prior to deploying OpenShift, and resulting the ID must be specified. The ARMY ID must be specified in the install config, and this is the process for importing these images will be included in the product documentation. For user-defined disk encryption keys on GCP, this is new that we are introducing in 4.7 for customers that with explicit compliance and security guidelines when deploying to GCP. We have added the support for user-managed KMS key for encrypting data on disks. The KMS key can be configured in the install config using the optional encrypt key object and associated fields. The KMS key must be created along with assigning the proper permissions to service account prior to deploying OpenShift. For AWS Security Token Service, I'll pass it on to Maria.
Hi, Tushar. Thank you so much. I'm Maria Bracho. Customers want OpenShift to be able to use temporary, short-lived credentials using during and post-installation. We've started this work with the AWS provider, since STS enables an authentication flow that allows a client to assume a role, resulting in short-lived credentials. AWS extended their SDK to offer Web Identity Token Auth. It allows the automation of the process of requesting and refreshing credentials using an OpenID Connect IAM identity provider. OpenShift can sign service account tokens trusted by AWS IAM. Tokens can be projected into a pod so that the pod can use those for authentication. We plan on releasing an initial implementation of this shortly following the release of OpenShift 4.7. And customers that want to try this will get a support exception. This will allow us to review and inform the implementation, which is currently manual, as well as the plans for upgrading to OpenShift 4.8. In 4.8, we plan to complete the work to GA this feature, meaning all the automation for pre-installation steps and upgrade path. We support only new deployments and greenfield cases. Support for migrating existing deployments to leverage AWS STS will come after 4.9. With that, I will pass it to Anita Chagler.
Hey, this is Anita. I will be covering OpenShift and OpenStack, taking over from Ramon, and we'll keep it short since we are running out of time. OpenShift and OpenStack is now supported with UPI and IPI installers, user provisioned infrastructure and installer provisioned infrastructure. And we're adding more features into the IPI support and building UPI flexible Ansible playbooks that allow customization. With 4.7, we can run on OpenStack 13 and OpenStack 16.1. We also have OpenStack bare metal integration with Ironic that was backported into ZStream. And we are also looking at auto scaling options from 0 nodes. So we didn't have 0 node support. Now we can go from 0 to and from 0 nodes. We have additional telco support starting on secondary interfaces with SRIOV support. And with OpenShift 4.8, the telco coverage will go up with support for IPI with SRIOV and also looking at OVS DPDK and OVS hardware offload with OpenShift 4.9. For 4.7, we also are building the Cinder CSI support. And with 4.8, we will add topology aware with IPI. For 4.7, again, we have bring your own load balancer, DNS, and your network with machine set for custom networks and courier support for IPv6 and dual stack. No IPI installers yet, but that's coming next. Thank you, and I will hand off to Peter.
Thanks, Anita. So let's talk a little bit about OpenStack on Rev. We've actually delivered a lot of functionality in OpenShift 4.6. If you remember, we did disconnected CSI storage and user provision infrastructure. We've actually spent a lot of time now tightening up the experience and making the overall quality improved, especially for things that happen unnaturally or where you have failures of different things in your virtual environment. So we've improved the certificate handling. We deploy high-performance VMs for the etcd nodes and the worker nodes, and then automatic guest agent installation, which improves the overall ability to collect debug data and just manage the nodes in general. One important thing I want to point out is from OpenShift 4.6 going forward, the tested supported configuration will be OpenShift on Rev 4.4. That's a very important thing. We know we have a lot of customers that are running on 4.3 today. That will continue to be supported in a EUS mode. But if you want to run OpenShift 4.6 or later, you're going to need to upgrade your virtual infrastructure to Rev 4.4. Let's talk about some of the control plane improvements now.
Mark, this is yours.
Yep, great. Thank you. Thanks, Peter. So in 4.7, we added a new API performance dashboard for both the Q+A API server and OpenShift API server, and with each more than 30 different metrics. So some of the metrics include API request rates, request durations. There's several metrics in understanding priority and fairness and how it's functioning, and so on. These plots can help characterize and understand API traffic in the cluster. And accessing this information is as simple as just navigating in the GUI to the navigation tab, then dashboards, and selecting API performance from the drop-down selector. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Mark. I guess on the cluster infrastructure side, we're continuing to move forward with the machine API. We've got lots that we're working on, but I guess in this release we focused on 3 high priority RFEs, and they all have a security theme because we know how important security is these days. The first one I've deliberately put up at the top of the list. It's a subtle but important change. When we architected the machine API, we supposed that every cloud provider API would be reachable from inside the cloud provider itself. And we used to ignore the global proxy setting, but for those of you that have customers that have inspection proxies and want to route all traffic through it for security reasons or others, then we've now actually look at that setting and we obey it. So it's definitely helped us with a few customers where this was a problem for us where they couldn't install before. And we've made that change this release, obviously. We've also added support for the AWS tenancy dedicated setting in the machine API. So for those of you with federal customers or federal regulations that you need to build where you've got to run on specific customer dedicated hardware in an AWS environment, that is now no longer a blocker to you using the machine API. And then finally, Google Cloud disk encryption sets. So we've had a few customers that have been wanting to and asking us to use their own keys when we do the encryption rather than the ones provided by Google. So we've started off by bringing that into this release as well. hopefully to get people over that bump. And I think next we're going to move on to Mark, who's going to tell us some marvelous facts about Red Hat CoreOS.
Hey everybody, and thanks Duncan. Mark Russell is here to tell you what's new in RCOS 4.7. It's just, in the interest of time, skip to the real headline features. They're all related to disk provisioning. So starting with new clusters, you can deploy CoreOS nodes now with a mirrored boot device. So that the node could lose either drive from that mirror and be able to function and reboot successfully. For secondary file systems, we're also supporting both mirroring and RAID 5. A couple other notes on disk provisioning. Multipath will be supported now during initial deployment and early boot with 4.7. And now any block device can be LUKS encrypted, not just the root or boot device. To be clear, all of these disk provisioning features are for new 4.7 clusters only. In 4.8, it should be possible to allow existing upgraded clusters to also take advantage, but we'll return to that subject on the next presentation. Last but not least, KDUMP will be tech preview in 4.7. There will be published documentation on how to manually enable capture of kernel core dumps. In any case, we strongly recommend that you open a case with Red Hat support when you're using KDUMP. I'll pass it back to Mark Curry for networking and routing.
Great, thanks, Mark. So in this one, we're going to talk a little bit about configurable application domain support. So customers have asked us for the ability to specify one of their own domain names as the default domain name for application routes, ingresses on the cluster. And with that, they'd use their own CA to sign TLS certificate. So we enable this capability via an app domain specification. There's a brief how-to on the right-hand side here that I created for you. It's pretty straightforward. Once you've set the app domain to the new default, you no longer have to specify that domain when you run the OC expose command. And as this is a domain that is owned by the customer, they're going to need to configure DNS for its proper resolution. And there's a suggestion on the fourth bullet to do just that. Next slide, please. On this one, we cover several SDN feature developments, the first one being SRIOV support for Intel N3K. I think that one is pretty self-explanatory. The idea is that N3K is now available for accelerated packet processing. The next, OVN egress firewall filtering with DNS names. Egress firewall is a improved version of Upstream's network policy egress, which can be used to limit the external host to which pods can communicate. For 7, we brought OVN egress firewall to feature parity with our current SDN implementation by adding the ability to use DNS names instead of just CIDRs. Fast data path OpenStack support. In 4.7, to address telco use cases, we've enabled fast data path when OpenShift is running on OpenStack. This directly addresses the fast data path technologies like SRIOV, OBS-DBTK, and OBS-TC Flower offload. The SRIOV operator was originally designed only to work with bare metal, but of course, that meant it directly controlled the NIC, and so it owned the NIC's physical functions. It could manage its virtual functions. But the problem running on OpenShift on OpenStack is that PF is owned by the underlying hypervisor and not present in the VM. So we've extended the capability to the SRIOV operator to work with the underlying hypervisor to be able to work with the VFs that are created. Next slide, please. Also in 4.7 will be full support for a new library named AppNetUtil. This library can be used by an application to assist with the gathering of network information associated with a pod. In particular, this targets and will be very useful for application programmers that are using SRIOV VFs in DBTK mode. That's a common scenario for anyone needing high-performance traffic throughput. There are 3 API methods implemented in this library. The functionality of each should be self-explanatory by the name. The third one has something worth mentioning, however, though, and that is the get huge pages will, for the moment, require the extra step of enabling the alpha feature gate in Kubernetes 120 or greater for the downward API huge pages, just set it to true. But that extra step will be resolved and will be unnecessary in the 4.8 release. Next slide, please. This slide serves as both an announcement of a new API in 4.7, but also as a sort of pub PSA for a change that's coming in 4.8 that some cluster administrators and app developers may need to prepare for. So all the details are in this slide, but briefly, in 4.8, the version of HA proxy will necessarily downcase HTTP header names, not the values, just the names, as permitted by the HTTP protocol standard. There's an example of this in the first bullet of the slide. When those header names are downcased, some legacy applications might be sensitive to that case conversion and could break. So to mitigate the issue, we created a new API that would allow cluster admins and app developers to accommodate those older legacy applications until such time as they can be fixed. And essentially, the admin can specify rules that transforms the header names in any HTTP1 requests. So this will give cluster admins and app developers the chance to fix their code or configure the API before upgrading to 4.8. Next slide, please.
Next slide. Thanks, Mark. I guess onto storage now. Just a couple of things that are worth talking about here or to highlight. So upstream, we are now seeing the deprecation of some in-tree drivers that are going on. So we need to be moving on and getting our CSI drivers out there really quickly. So you see here the Cinder CSI driver and the Google Persistent Disk joining the list that we already have, but you'll see a lot more movement on this going forward. And the other big thing, it seemed like we went through a time when everyone was asking for Snapshot. Well, Snapshot has gone GA upstream, so we get that now in OpenShift, which is great news for all the vendors out there that are investing in CSA operators to run on OpenShift and use them that way. Next slide, please. On the OpenShift container storage side, again, a lot going on, a lot on the security side, like the Vault key management system integration, but I think we should really move on and let Robert tell you some interesting facts about telco.
Thanks, Duncan. The first feature that we've added in 4.7 is the ability, a virtual routing and forwarding CNI plugin. This is a meta plugin that you typically use with another CNI like Mac VLAN or SRIOV. It allows you to create a virtual routing and forwarding space, and these spaces are applied to secondary network interfaces and are isolated, and this allows you to have overlapping seeder blocks for each of these spaces on your secondary interface. Next slide, please. In 4.7, we've added a new test to our CNF test suite. Our CNF test suite is a set of tests that allows you to verify that your cluster is configured for a CNF, therefore assuring you that your network function is ready to be deployed onto that cluster. In 4.7, we've added the operating system latency measurement tests, OS-LAT to be specific, to this suite of tests. Next slide, please. Our CNF certification program recognizes 3 levels: good, better, and best. Our first batch of vendors validated CNFs have been published, and the list will continue to increase as we complete new validations. We have a growing pipe of CNF vendors joining our certification program, and our goal is to help them reach to the better and best certification levels. With that said, I'd like to hand it over to Kirsten and Anand to cover security and compliance.
Hi, so as we talked about earlier, the OpenShift compliance operator gives you the ability to automate auditing for technical controls associated with regulatory requirements. Not only does the compliance operator allow you to automate that work, you can also automate remediation with the compliance operator. In parallel, we have been working on documentation to help you understand how OpenShift can meet the technical controls in various regulatory frameworks. So you can see here that we have a product applicability guide available for HIPAA, for ISO 27001, and for FISMA. We're working on getting those latter two available externally on redhat.com. We also have an OpenShift 4 security guide, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, We just published the OpenShift 4 hardening guide. You will need to ask your Red Hat account team to help you get that. We expect it to be replaced by the CIS OpenShift benchmark in late January, early February, and that's the reason that we've chosen not to make it publicly available at this time. We also wanted to mention, for those of you who think about certifications, that our hosted team has been working, our managed services team has been working hard on certifications. And so we have listed those here just so that you have an idea, again, to demonstrate that we know certified deployments can be achieved with OpenShift 4. Next slide, please, and over to Anand.
Thanks, Kirsten. So this feature is about the ability to log out and destroy all non-active sessions and tokens. So first of all, the problem. So in OpenShift today, users have the ability to create multiple tokens by running OC login repeatedly, right? So for instance, you can log in with the browser, you can log in with the command shell. In fact, you can open like a couple of command shells and just type OC login. As a consequence, multiple tokens get created. But when, let's say you go to one of those terminals and you type logout, only the latest token is logged out. And why is this important? Because an attacker could reuse a token from another session, like from a browser or from a terminal where you have not done a OC logout, and use those session credentials or session IDs to basically get access to your cluster, right? So as an analogy, I mean, think of Facebook, right? So if you, let's say, log into Facebook from a browser, from a mobile device, from your iPad, but let's say you log out of Facebook only from your iPad and somebody gets access to your phone or your browser, they pretty much log in. So this is exactly the same where we want to give OpenShift users the ability to log out all active sessions. So you would simply open a command prompt, say OC get user auth access tokens, get a list of all the OAuth access tokens. So for instance, you get the names of each of the tokens, you get the client names. So for instance, was the client token from a browser, or was it from a console, or was it from a challenging client? And then you can also find out when the token was created, when it expired, what's the token inactivity timeout on those tokens. And once you figure all of that out, you can then select each token that you want to delete and say OC delete user OAuth access token. So again, back to the Facebook analogy, it would be something like Facebook lets you list all your active sessions, and for each of those sessions, you can go and say log out. This is a very similar analogy to that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So Windows. So we went generally available with the Windows Machine Config Operator sometime in December of 2020, which was available on two platforms, AWS and Azure. And with 4.7, we're proud to announce we will be going generally available with vSphere API. So next slide, please. And what this will let us do is unlock a lot of customers who are on vSphere using API to use the Windows Machine Config Operator to bootstrap Windows nodes that are running on vSphere. Slight point to note is bring your own host is still work in progress. We are hoping to get that by maybe Q1 or Q2. So until bring your own host comes, we will not be able to support things like vSphere UPI, and other platforms like bare metal, Red Hat virtualization, so on and so forth. But we feel there's a good start. Customers running vSphere API should be able to use the Windows Machine Config Operator, and that should be available in 4.7. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Anand. And then last, and by no means least, we come to the multi-architecture updates. Actually, a lot going on this release, but let me just stick to a couple of things. The first big one up at the front there is we're making KVM available for IBM Z platforms. So before you had to use the ZVM environment, and this is really useful to customers that are already familiar with KVM that want to use it. There's also some kind of price considerations in there that they take into. The other big thing for this release is multipath support. So with IBM Z and Power, the big applications that they run are pretty important. They want to give that better HA experience. So now we're bringing it onto those Power and Z platforms as well. And so let me end by handing you back to our debonair host, Tushar, so you can wrap up.
Thank you all. Thank you, the OpenShift product management team. Thank you, audience, for listening to us. As you saw, we covered a lot of ground here. We are definitely over time, so I apologize for that. But as you saw, The PMs definitely put a lot of heart into it, and they try to get into the right level of detail so that you have the information out there. As I said earlier, I mean, it is recorded, the Q&A, lots of Q&A questions, so bring them on. So that was all good. If we have any unanswered, we'll address them offline. With that, without further ado, have a nice day, and thank you all.